Have you ever wondered why love feels so completely unpredictable, yet somehow universally familiar? Imagine for just a second that I've actually been present for every single love story ever told. Right from the very first page of human history, all the way to that quiet little conversation happening in some cafe right this second. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a breathtaking framework from the book Understanding Love. We're going to look way past the romance, past the heartbreak, and examine the actual undeniable architecture of relationships, because we're about to see love not as some mysterious accident, but as something with a distinct, ancient shape.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this idea is going to completely change how we talk about romance. Here's the quote. Love is not a feeling that simply arrives and then either stays or leaves, as random as weather. Love is a geometry. Just sit with that for a second, right? We're so deeply conditioned to believe love is just this feeling, a flutter in your chest, a sudden storm that just overtakes you. But this framework, it argues that love actually has structure. It has very real forces acting upon it from specific angles. It's not an accident at all. It is a geometry. So picture this. On one side, we have this chaotic, blurred image of a storm, that random weather. And honestly, that's how most of us blindly stumble through relationships, isn't it? Just reacting to lightning strikes and sudden downpours. But on the other side, imagine a clean, sharp, glowing geometric triangle piercing right through the dark. That right there is the paradigm shift. When you stop seeing love as this uncontrollable weather and start seeing it as a geometric structure, you realize there are actual laws to it. There's a literal anatomy to why a relationship holds together and exactly why it collapses.
Now, to really grasp this geometry, we actually have to start before the shape even forms. Think about the sun and the moon, two totally separate orbits. Before any love story begins, two people exist in completely separate worlds. They're just going about their lives, maybe on opposite sides of the city, carrying their own personal weather. They aren't even looking at each other. But then, quietly, with absolutely no drama or big announcement, time moves. It just bends those two separate orbits, maybe just a fraction of a degree. It's an adjustment so incredibly subtle that neither person notices, until one totally ordinary, world-altering day, those paths finally cross.
And this brilliantly illustrates our first main point. Let's move into part 1, Anatomy of the Triangle. The underlying geometry of every single relationship, yours, mine, the one you might be healing from right this very minute, is a triangle. So let's deconstruct it. First, down at the bottom, we have the two corners. These are the two people, the lovers. Then, pointing up toward the sky, we have the apex. That is the reason you were drawn together. Essentially, the answer to the classic, "So how did you two meet?" question. And finally, there's the interior, the space enclosed within all three sides. These are three distinct elements, and they have to align perfectly.
Let's zoom in on the bottom of that shape first, the corners. The absolute most vital thing to understand here is that nobody, and I mean nobody, arrives at a new love empty-handed. You carry everything you have ever been right to your corner. You bring your entire finished history, every single scar that healed a little sideways, every apology you rehearsed in your head but never actually gave, and all your carefully guarded hopes. When you stand at your corner and look across at that other person, you're filtering them through everything you've ever survived. You are basically two entirely finished books, just waiting to be read by each other.
So we have our two deeply complex people at the corners, and we have their reason for connecting up at the apex, but what fills the space between them? That brings us to part 2, the invisible air of timing.
And here is a truth that honestly hurts a little bit. Timing does not care about real. Timing only cares about ready. Have you ever loved someone at the completely wrong time, where you felt the profound rightness of the person, but the absolute wrongness of the moment? If the air inside that triangle, the timing, is off, it literally does not matter if the love is real. If one person is just too raw, or too closed off, or maybe still full of someone else, the sides of the triangle will try to reach toward each other, but the center will just collapse.
Now, from the perspective of time itself, standing way outside the triangle, everything actually makes perfect sense. Time doesn't fall in love. Time makes the falling possible. You see, time has been quietly arranging the conditions of your life for years. By the time you actually notice you're falling for someone, the arrangement is already finished. Time saw what neither corner could possibly see, how the years that shaped you separately were quietly perfectly preparing you to be exactly what that other person needed in that exact moment. Pretty wild to think about, right? And as that timing takes hold, the connection starts to build. But it is almost never a straight line. As the book notes, love rarely announces itself as a decision. It arrives disguised as 100 small accidents. It's this pull, and then a push. It's beautiful hesitation. It's those drafted and then quickly deleted text messages. It's the canceled and uncanceled plans. And actually, this isn't hesitation at all. It's diligence. It's two people taking their own pulse, accumulating 100 small yeses to build trust in that invisible air before really committing to the run. Okay, now that we've mapped out the philosophical geometry of how a connection actually starts, let's look at how this shape operates over the long haul in Part 3, the stages of a partnership.
It turns out every real partnership moves through 5 very distinct stages as the triangle matures. First up, forming. That's when you're just testing the waters and learning each other's shape. Then, 2, storming, where conflict inevitably, and I mean inevitably, surfaces. 3 is norming, where you kind of settle into your own private, unspoken rules together. 4, performing, when the relationship functions steadily, exactly as it was built to. And finally, 5, adjourning, which is when a shape no longer fits and has to either end or be completely rebuilt from the ground up.
Let's zoom in on stage 2 for a second, storming, when conflict surfaces and roles are contested. So the crucial point here is that a small fight is absolutely not proof that the love was a mistake. Seeing the tired, kind of unglamorous person underneath someone's best behavior, that isn't a betrayal. The storming phase arrives exactly on schedule. In fact, it's what real intimacy actually requires. It is the moment your geometry is getting stress tested for the real world.
Now, during this storming phase, people often panic, right? They start asking themselves if they're staying out of love or just out of fear of being alone. But remember this: fear of losing someone and love for that same someone are not opposites. They arrive together more often than apart. Finding fear tangled up inside your commitment doesn't invalidate your love at all. It just means you're a human being choosing someone under the entirely normal condition of not being able to predict the future. If you can survive the storming, you unlock what this explainer calls the compound interest of love. And this is practically a mathematical truth. Effort rewarded with more love only ever goes up. If care is answered with even greater care, and affection with greater affection, the relationship just compounds. When two people consistently try quietly to outgive each other, the relationship doesn't decay. It grows exponentially. But the absolute second it becomes a ledger, a scoreboard of who owes who, that's when the whole thing stops working.
So, we've talked about the abstract, and we've talked about the psychology. Now I want to pivot directly to you for Part 4, finding your own shape.
Think about this for a second. The triangle is always there. The question is whether you can see it. Let's move to anger and see how this builds into your own personal reality. Think about the person occupying the other corner of a shape you're standing inside right now. Or maybe one you used to stand in. Nearly every single rupture, every fight, every long silence happens because you can only feel your own corner. You can't see the whole shape. But what happens when you finally step back and look at it?
You have to name your triangle, because unnamed things are so much harder to survive than named ones. Identify what you brought to your corner. Identify exactly what they brought to theirs. Look at that apex. What was the real, true reason you were drawn together? Was it to be loved, or was it just to be publicly claimed? And what about the interior, the timing, that invisible air that held you back until you were actually ready, orchestrating all those near misses you probably just called bad luck? When you finally name these forces, you can actually understand what shaped your life.
So I'm going to leave you with this final lingering thought. What is your triangle right now, today? Think about the exact moment your connection began to form. And looking back, was the timing right, or did you have to wait for it to become right? This geometric shape has been yours the entire time, just waiting to be seen. Go see it now. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.